Hi guys, welcome to November's Dispatches. And as you can see before you, there's quite a large collection of releases that will be coming out by mid-November this month, obviously. Before I get down to all of the things that you see in front of you, I'd just like to give you a short report on my recent travels to the United States, where I was fortunate to visit, I have to say, four of my favorite states in America. That was obviously beginning with Texas, going on to North Carolina, traveling down to South Carolina, before then driving on to Georgia, and once more returning to Texas and flying back to Hong Kong. Well, it all began on the 9th of October when I flew to Dallas Fort Worth direct from Hong Kong because Cathay Pacific, Hong Kong's own airline, now flies direct to Texas, which is great for me because I could take a 14.5 hour flight to Dallas Fort Worth and have a little stopover there before flying on to San Antonio, which is about 1.5 hours by flight down the road. Now, the reason for going to San Antonio was obviously to see our co-founder and fellow traveller, Laura McAllister Johnson. That's the lady that's in charge of King Country, Texas. And we were doing some fairly major renovations to the store there. And it also gave me a chance to meet up with Amber, our store manager, who does a fantastic job, has been with us for many years and is very much an integral part of the King and Country team. And also to meet Mike, our latest addition to the staff in San Antonio. As I said, I wanted to see the special renovations that had been made, and at the same time to host a special evening event that we called, I think it was Cocktails and Conversations with Andy. So I suppose that means me. But what was nice is we had a pretty large gathering of just over 50 collectors and guests at the store on the Friday evening. And I can happily say it was a good time that was had by all. It was great talking to many of the regular collectors that I knew, meeting quite a lot of fresh ones that I'd never met before, and as usual, discussing all things toy soldiers, listening to their wants, needs, and must-haves, and at the same time giving them a heads up on some of the things that we were planning to do and would be coming out before Christmas and into the new year. So that was Texas, a great chance to meet old friends, make a few new ones, and enjoy some beautiful fall weather in that part of the country. Now, after 9 days in Texas, I then moved on to Charlotte, North Carolina. Charlotte, North Carolina is where another good friend, Mr. Fred D'Ambrosio, who's been a long-time King Country collector, especially of parade figures. Fred had commissioned King Country to produce some very special figures of a unit of the Summerall Guard. This is an exclusive parade unit that is part of the Citadel Military College, or I think the full title is the South Carolina Corps of Cadets. And you can find the Citadel itself, which is in Charleston, South Carolina. So after a couple of days in Charlotte, where we also got to meet the very talented artist and diorama builder, Dan Nance, who's become a very good friend. And Dan had just opened his new gallery, and it was wonderful to see all of his great paintings and see some fabulous dioramas. So if you get anywhere near Charlotte, North Carolina, you have to visit the Dan Nance Gallery. You can find it online, check it out. Well worth a visit. And not only do you get to see the gallery, but you get to see behind the scenes. And you see where Dan not only paints many of his great artworks, but also you get to see how he builds some of his dioramas, which really are an absolute delight to see. So after a couple of days in Charlotte, Fred and myself drove down to Charleston, South Carolina, which was about, let me say it was about a 4 hour drive, but a very pleasant drive in the fall weather that obviously is happening, not just in Hong Kong, but all over the States. We had great weather, drove down to Charleston. It was my very first visit to Charleston, South Carolina. And if any of you have been there, you already know it's one of the most historic cities in America. And obviously, it's one of the cradles of the southern states during the Civil War. And I think it features fairly heavily in the Margaret Mitchell novel, Gone with the Wind. But I had never been to Charleston before, so I was really looking forward to visiting there. And of course, the reason Fred and myself were going to Charleston, that is the location of the Citadel, this great military college that's been there for, it must be at least 150 years. And that's where the Summerall Guard is located. So we took samples of the special figures that King Country has designed and produced on behalf of Fred that he wanted to present to the Citadel itself. So not only did we get to meet some of the folks at the Citadel, we also got a chance with Fred being the guide, because he's an alumni of the Citadel, and he gave me a guided tour of all the buildings, and it's just an amazing place, incredible in terms of they've got all kinds of military hardware dotted around the campus. So you can see a battery of field guns, you see a Sherman tank, you see landing craft, you can see even an Apache helicopter. I'm sure I've missed some other things, but just amazing. And of course, all of the young men and a few young women, they're all dressed in uniform and very smart they look too. So I picked up a few souvenirs for myself before Fred and myself then went off to explore the rest of Charleston. One of the great things about Charleston, because of its central part of the Civil War, is I was desperate to see Fort Sumter. Alas, because of the government shutdown, we couldn't actually get onto Fort Sumter itself, but we could see it in the harbour from a place called Fort Moultrie, which was an artillery battery that had originally been set up, I believe, in Revolutionary War times. So we could watch Fort Sumter in the distance, and then we decided that we'd go and visit another of the great attractions in Charleston, which is the Essex class World War II carrier, the USS Yorktown, which is moored alongside Second World War USS Laffey, a destroyer that was attacked by kamikazes. In fact, they nicknamed the USS Laffey the ship that wouldn't die. I think it was struck by something like 6 or 7 kamikaze aircraft. Somehow, managed to survive and went on to serve in the US Navy until I think it was the early 1970s before being decommissioned. But if you go to Charleston, you must go to an area called Patriots Point, where the Yorktown and the Laffey are moored alongside, and go and visit them. The Yorktown itself has got a terrific collection of both World War II and post-war aircraft all over its decks, and hangar decks below the main flight deck. So check that out as well. And at the same time, we got to enjoy ourselves with a couple of very good meals in some very interesting restaurants all around Charleston. It's a beautiful city. The old town is just exquisite. In fact, parts of it reminded me of London, the nicer parts of London, that is, these days. So if you have to get down, or not have to, if you should go down to that part of the States, please visit Charleston. You won't regret it. So from Charleston, after a couple of days, Fred and myself drove on to Atlanta, Georgia, and we were going there to meet another old friend that I've known for quite a few years. We first met at the Chicago Toy Soldier Show back when it was held at the Hyatt Regency in Schaumburg quite a few years ago, and we'd remained friends all these years. And last year, Mr. Craig Warner of Atlanta had invited myself to visit. And this time he also invited along Fred too. So we spent a couple of days with Craig at his beautiful house along with his wife Polly, and got to see one of his, I should say, Craig and Fred are both history buffs, but in addition, Craig is also a massive Beatles fan. And of course I am too. So it gave us a chance to talk about the Beatles, watch a few old Beatles movies, and reminisce about our dim and distant past when we were both much younger and much hairier. But that's another story. While we were down in Atlanta, Craig suggested that we go and visit the National Infantry Museum which is located at Fort Benning, Georgia. It's about a couple of hours' drive from Atlanta. Now, Fort Benning may be familiar to some of you, and if you look carefully at this big movie poster behind me, which is for John Wayne's 1968 movie, The Green Berets, that was actually filmed at Fort Benning. They never went anywhere near Vietnam, although it's all about Vietnam. But now, I think Fort Benning is still the home of the US Army Rangers. And of course, we've featured Rangers both for our D-Day series and also our Mogadishu series, Black Hawk Down. And we actually saw some Rangers while we were down at the museum. But the National Infantry Museum was opened, I believe, in 2012. It's a state-of-the-art modern museum. It is awesome. It's the only way to describe it. They basically tell the story of the US Army's infantry from Revolutionary War times all the way up to the present. What particularly impressed me was their life-size dioramas, if you could call them that, or displays of US infantrymen in various wars and conflicts. And for me, obviously, I had they have a section of what looks like Point de Hoc in Normandy, where the US Army Rangers actually scaled the cliffs to capture the guns that were supposedly on top of Point de Hoc. And after vicious fighting, and it took many casualties, they managed to overcome the Germans that were on the top of the cliff, got there only to find that the artillery guns that they thought were positioned in the gun emplacements on top of Point de Hoc had actually been removed a few weeks before the D-Day landings. But it was still an amazing military feat, and it is one of the great stories of D-Day. And of course, you see it relived in movies like The Longest Day. So apart from that particular display, some of the other displays that I was most impressed with were the Vietnam one, where again they had a Huey helicopter disgorging a bunch of GI infantrymen into some paddy field in South Vietnam. Absolutely fantastic. To see the amount of detail, you could swear that the figures could almost come alive. It was like a moment caught in time. So the Vietnam display, amazing. And then, of course, we went on to more recent wars, the wars in Afghanistan, the wars in Iraq, and even, of course, Mogadishu. And they had some terrific displays of Humvees and Bradley fighting vehicles with all kinds of GIs in modern gear carrying the modern weapons. I can't begin to describe just how great this museum is. It has to be one of not just the finest in North America, this is one of the finest military museums in the whole wide world. And again, I recommend anyone that visits Atlanta, Georgia, to make that side trip down to Fort Benning, Georgia, and visit the National Infantry Museum, one of the best. So following that, we come back, had a nice relaxing time at Craig and Polly's beautiful house before the following day, flying back to Dallas and then getting my flight back to Hong Kong. And suddenly, before I knew it, the fun and games were over and it was back to work. So talking of back to work, let's go and see what we have in front of us here. Now, as you can see, it's a huge collection, but let's start right over here. Two German staff cars, but they're not any of these staff cars. They both belong to Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. Now, the first release is the furthest away one, which, if you look closely, and you'll see in a close-up later, is actually Erwin Rommel in the desert with the famed Afrika Korps, which Rommel commanded. At that time, he was still just a general, and he was put in charge of the Afrika Korps and was in charge of it from 1941 to 1943. And you'll see this particular staff car comes with a standing figure of Rommel. And by the way, although he's standing in the back, you can actually take him out of the back seat. You can have him standing on the ground. And he's also got his Afrika Korps driver and his Afrika Korps aide-de-camp sitting in the front seat. It's in two-tone desert camouflage, and if you look closely, you'll see the Afrika Korps palm tree and swastika symbol on both the mudguard and on the side door of the vehicle itself. The vehicles, by the way, they're both the same vehicles. They're both Mercedes-Benz 320 Cabriolet, two-door staff cars. were used extensively during World War II. And of course, that brings us to the second version, which is the one right here in 3-color camouflage, typical of late war Northern Europe. Again, you'll see a standing figure of Erwin Rommel. By this time, he was a field marshal, and Hitler had put Rommel in late 1943 in charge of shoring up the Atlantic Wall defences. The Germans, of course, knew that the Allies were planning an invasion of France, and they just didn't know where exactly. I think Rommel himself was one of the guys that thought that Normandy would be a primary place for them to land. Other people thought it was going to be the Pas-de-Calais, which was the shortest route between Great Britain and France. However, the Allies themselves chose Normandy because of the wide open beaches and the fact they could land as many troops as possible in the first few hours. So what we're showing here is Rommel in one of his tours of inspection of the Atlantic Wall, checking up in the defences. The staff car is actually in the markings of the Panzer Lehr Division, which was one of the armoured divisions that had been allocated to this front. So in this case, Rommel had borrowed one of the Panzer Lehr vehicles, and he's standing with his aide-de-camp, who again is wearing standard German officer uniform of the period, with those cords along his right shoulder, which define him as an aide-de-camp. And you can see he's looking into his briefcase as if to pull out some plans of the local area for Rommel to study. Rommel himself is dressed in the formal greatcoat of a German general, complete with red lapels. And again, it's a 3-figure set. There's a seated driver sitting in the front in normal Wehrmacht uniform, and the 2 figures of these. Now, there's a special offer comes with both of these vehicles. If you order these before December 31st of this year, you get a special $40 bonus discount. So that brings the price down. You can check out the prices, for both these vehicles in the accompanying dispatches. But a great deal. And maybe I should, at this point, draw your attention to all of these German figures that you see in front of the staff cars. Now, if you look carefully, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 German figures, and they're split into 3 2-man sets. That's this little guy's down here, this 2-man figure set here, and these 2 figure sets here, plus singles, single and single riflemen. Really useful. Now they're wearing what I would call the classic Wehrmacht infantry uniform from the early part of the war, the first half of World War II. So they've got the field grey trousers, the sort of grey-green jackets. They've got the steel helmet that's still got the 2 decals on each side of the helmet. One has got the German eagle on the left-hand side, and the right-hand side has got the national shield in black, white, and red. This was the standard uniform in the early part of the war, what you could call the victorious Blitzkrieg years, where they had overrun Poland in 1939, France and the Low Countries of Belgium, Holland, and Luxembourg in 1940, and all the way into 1941 with Operation Barbarossa and the invasion of the Soviet Union. So any of these figures can be used for those periods, but in fact they can even be used later in the war. You can see Germans infantry in France, even as late as 1944, wearing similar uniforms. Of course, other ones that were adapted later, but this is the classic look of German infantry that you also see in many movies and documentaries. So that's those guys. Now, still talking about World War II, we come to a couple of years later, 1944, and we're talking about Battle of the Bulge. And again, we've got a nice little selection of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 GI infantry wearing a mixture of M1943 jackets, which were introduced in 1943 and replaced the 1941 field jacket. The 43 jacket was a longer green uniform jacket, and was felt to be a lot more comfortable. Now, if you didn't wear one of those, you probably would have worn the standard US Army woolen greatcoat. So all of these other guys you can see, from the bazooka guy to these riflemen here, and there's even a guy saluting, and you'll see it at the end here, a very famous fighting general along with his pet dog called Willie. This was not just claimed to be, but many considered this particular general the best American fighting general of World War II. And he had some competition, but he's one of my personal favorites, and he's one that I've featured over the years. So this is a brand new edition of that fighting general, along with his pet dog, which, by the way, was an English bulldog terrier. That I think he found it, or was given the dog when he was sent to England after being sent home from, was it Italy or was it North Africa? Anyway, he was under a cloud after supposedly striking a subordinate who was suffering from shell shock, I believe. So that's some great additions to our Battle of the Bulge Americans. But you may have noticed something rather large in the background here. This, I'm happy to say, is 2 examples of the largest waterline landing craft that King Country has ever produced. These are brand new LCM-3s. Now, the LCM-3 stands for Landing Craft Mechanized. These were primarily meant to be able to carry, for instance, the load of a 30-ton Sherman tank and deliver it on the beach, or they could take all kinds of armored cars or jeeps and trailers or even trucks. And if they didn't take over mechanical pieces like that, they could also carry anywhere between 50 to 60 infantrymen in them. Now, these 2 particular models both got 50 caliber machine guns manned by 2 US Navy gunners, and each ship also comes with a coxswain in the cockpit, the armored cockpit at the rear. Now, you can see from the 2 examples I've shown here, one has got the ramp down and one has got the ramp up. Underneath this section here is actually the mechanical works that you can just turn clockwise, anti-clockwise, to raise the ramp and lower the ramp. And we'll probably show you some photographs or even a little video on that later. But it allows you to do whatever way you want. I should tell you that originally when we were designing this, the manufacturer that we were working with offered to put an electronic battery working in here that would do it electronically. However, we also knew that causes all kinds of problems when you're shipping things overseas. So sadly, we had to say, no, it looks great, but rather than have a little electronic gizmo that could do it, I'm afraid we have to do it manually, just for safety reasons, because you're not allowed to send things containing batteries through the international mails. So that's why we've done it manually. However, the mechanics are all hidden underneath the cockpit, which comes off, and you can then adjust to whatever you want. Now, these models, I should tell you, are in high quality fiberglass, so they're super tough, super strong. However, things like the guns and some other attachments on them are in metal, and as are all 3 of the crewmen are standard King and Country all-metal hand-painted figures. So in addition to offering 2 different numbers, you'll see US 76 and US 48. You can select which one. Each one, these are the first 200 that we've produced, and we've done 100 of 76 and 100 of 48. Each of these models will also come with a complimentary KNC high quality resin tank that you can place inside, or if you've got one of our other Sherman tanks, they'll also fit really nicely into it. So it's a terrific deal. You'll see what the prices are when you check out. We think it's very competitive. We've only produced 100 of each, and you need to order while you can because I think they'll go fairly fast. But it's the biggest, waterline model we've done, just over 20 inches long, but it can easily accommodate a deuce and a half truck, a Jeep, a trailer, an armored car, or as you can see here, a Sherman tank, whether it be a K&C resin one or a K&C all metal Sherman. So that's available as well. And each one will come with a complimentary tank as well. Now, I think the last two final things is right away over here with Rommel and these desert Mercedes Benz. You'll see a brand new Life of Jesus figure, which is a lady from somewhere in the Middle East. She might be Arab or she might be Jewish, but she's carrying a large stone jar of water on her shoulder. She's either going to the well or coming back from it. And of course, in those days, very few places had running water in each house. You had to go to the local well and pick up your fresh water and take it home for washing or cooking or whatever. But you can see that her face is covered by a veil. And again, that wasn't just or isn't just an Islamic thing. Back in those days, whether they be Jewish or Arab, most women would cover their lower face in a veil, and that was basically for reasons of modesty or reverence, but it was fairly common practice. So that's what we have. And by the way, this is a really useful figure. It can be used for Life of Jesus. It can be used all the way up to the Crusades. It can be used up through Napoleon in Egypt, all the way to the wars of the 20th century, and even today in some parts of the Middle East, you would see women still dressed like that. So it's a great figure should you get it. Finally, we're almost at Christmas. So what would Christmas be without King & Country having a little Christmas set? And this is our very latest. This is our 25th Christmas Santa set. And this time it's Santa and his panda bears. When I was up in Beijing earlier this year, we were at where was it? The airport. We noticed there was actually a shop selling nothing but toy panda bears. And for some reason, it just, gave me an idea. We've done Santa and his polar bears, but let's do something. Panda bears, who doesn't love a panda bear? If you don't like a panda bear, there's something wrong with you. So what we did here is a mama panda bear, two of the little panda cubs, and they've got some Christmas presents, and obviously they're with Santa. Santa's got his little book of good boys and good girls that he's looking at to see who he's going to deliver his presents to on Christmas Eve. And why not be joined by this little family set of panda bears as well? So if you're looking for a special little stocking filler that is perfect for the Yuletide season, let me recommend this. But come to that, let me recommend any of this bumper bundle of special gifts for this November. I hope there's something for you. It's certainly one of the biggest lots of releases we've had for many a long day, and I hope you like something here. But once again, thanks for your patience. Thanks for me rabbiting on about everything, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.